Okay, we're going to move right along now. We have a very special guest, Dr. Patti Fletcher. I'm very excited to talk to her. She has an incredible background. Her book is incredible, and her website's incredible. Look at this. We help leaders change the world. This is Dr. Patti here, if you haven't figured that out. Some data on the front of her webpage. We love that, right? Check out her website. Go to Dr. Patti Fletcher, DrPattifletcher.com for those of you listening by audio. And you can check out the website here. There's articles, insights, ways to contact Dr. Patti. You can check out her book too. We'll put the links for both of these in the chat box and in the comment section. Her book is Disruptors, Success Strategies for Women Who Break the Mold. And this is a highly rated book. Definitely check it out. You can get it on Kindle, audiobook, and paperback. A little bit about Dr. Patti. She was included in the coveted 18 Women to Watch in 2018 by Brown Brothers Harriman and by Brown Brothers and Harriman. Dr. Patti is an internationally sought after speaker, seasoned tech executive, award-winning marketing and business influencer, board member, angel and investor. Angel investor, maybe both. Dr. Patti has appeared on the NASDAQ, Cheddar, Bloomberg, and Greater Boston, among other media. She writes for Entrepreneur.com, Inc., The Guardian, Forbes, and The Digitalist, and has contributed or been featured in Time Magazine, Real Simple, Al Jazeera, Forbes, Fortune, Newsweek, The Boston Globe, not over yet, The Muse, The Huffington Post, and many more. She is the author of the best-selling book, again, Disruptors, Success Strategies for Women Who Break the Mold. Again, you can go to Dr. Patti Fletcher, or where a lot of us hang out, on LinkedIn. We'll put the LinkedIn link there for you. Definitely connect with her. Show her how engaged PhDs are. Make sure you tell her thank you for being here with us. Dr. Patti Fletcher, I'm going to make sure she can start her video here. Should be able to turn it on now, Dr. Patti. There we go.
There we go.
And I'll hide everybody else. How are you today?
Great. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for being here with us. I really appreciate your time.
Thrilled to be here. And, you know, seeing my face so big from my website, watching, going, thank God for airbrushing. Yeah.
Your website's great. I really, really like it. It's
thank you.
very, very professional, and your background's incredible. And we're really looking forward to having a conversation with you about a lot of the topics we kind of set up in the Show Me the Data section. So again, thanks for being here.
Absolutely. I hope we get to talk about that last stat.
Yeah.
Jeanette talked about around gender diversity, because I don't agree with it. So I think
great.
Nuance there. Yeah. I'd love to talk about that.
Fantastic. No, this is good. I think anytime we have somebody say they don't agree with the data, we get excited as PhDs because we know a good discussion's coming up. Well, to set that up, I wanted to talk a little bit about your background. And I really, we always want to know, like, why you got into what you're doing. Why did you get into success and coaching and working with, tech companies, everything that you do? What was your path, and what led to you ultimately writing your book?
Yeah, it's a great question. My first grown-up job was in enterprise software, and it's funny hearing you talk about imposter syndrome, because I think I probably still have it. So I was hired into this job that I was so underqualified for because nobody sent me the memo saying women are supposed to get hired for their experience, not their potential. I missed school that day, right? So I took this job instead of taking the class, which is another cliche comment people say about women. And it was around HR software, and it was pre-Y2K, so everybody's making money and everything's great. And then there was HR, right? And so going in and really kind of getting this intersection between technology and how we manage people and organize people. And HR was in the basement, in the windowless office. Nobody talked to them, right? They were an afterthought. And here they are really managing and being responsible for the most important reason that you succeed or fail as a business. And back then people weren't thinking that way, but it was pretty obvious. So I loved that intersection. I loved working for an enterprise software company and getting this real understanding that, my goodness, if these systems go down, industry goes down, GDP goes down, right? So really seeing that and seeing the impact on changing how we work and therefore how we live and all that fun stuff. Fast forward a bunch of years. And by then it wasn't just HR software, started working on big data before big data was a thing. And a lot of that predictive analytics, getting past just looking backwards, from reporting and moving forward and seeing how we can use essentially at the time transactional data or enterprise data to solve some real big people-based problems. So I go back for my PhD because I wanted to learn how to research like a scholar. And some of this is in my book. I have this very big fascination with my maternal grandmother who helped to raise me. My mom was a working mom before working moms were a thing. And so I spent a lot of my early years with my mom's mom, who I knew very little about. I knew she was orphaned in the genocide with the Armenians, but I didn't really know a lot.
Wow.
And so my MBA research did nothing for me. So I was going down a path of just learning how to research like a scholar, studying that more technical stuff that I was focused in on. And about a year and a half into my dissertation proposal, which as a PhD, that is terrifying, right? For me, it was scarier than the actual research itself. And oh my God, I freaking loved my oral defense. I thought that was like being on a stage. It was fabulous. So that to me was, pretty crazy to get that far into a topic, take this class around feminist leadership theory, learn about Carol Gilligan, learn about the challenges that we have, seeing all of these ways in business that we have defined what success looks like, who gets to be successful, how do we get there, what do successful decisions look like, and seeing how that through a gender lens. A few things happened. I realized I was the dumbest person ever because I never really looked around the room and went, okay, I'm in tech. Where the heck are all the women? Because that was my normal, right? And so that was a challenge. And then looking at the time, and this was in the mid kind of early 2000s, that all of the research out there had the glass ceiling in technology intensive industries at that kind of VP level. And I love boards for many reasons. So I ended up switching my dissertation to study women who held board or director positions in publicly held life sciences and technology businesses. So few of them then. Life sciences is way better, tech not so great. We've kind of gone the other way. But wanting to understand how these women who were a few generations before me, how they were hacksawing their way to where so few people went. And at the same time, because I grew up in enterprise software, and enterprise software really forces you to create a systems view of things where you ask questions like, so the world this system lives in is extremely diverse. We have really no one race in the majority at this point. Women were 51% of the workforce in most economies. We were coming up to having the 5 generations at work, right? All of those different demographic things. And of course, the pervasiveness of the third industrial revolution at the time. And seeing, gosh, the way that we have run our businesses, the way success looked like, all of those things I learned that were based on all white men, right, being those research participants, it doesn't quite fit anymore, right? What makes this possible to have this disparity, to have this imbalance of power? And it really set me forth. And at the same time, I'm hearing from CEOs going, oh my God, we don't have the talent we need today. And dear Lord, we don't have the talent we need tomorrow. There's a shortage of talent. And yet here I am looking at all these incredible women, incredible people who were not Caucasian, right? All of these folks who were in the other represented populations who were highly skilled, highly qualified, not just intelligent and all that, but capable, right? And had those networks and those things you bring to the table for those influence jobs. And just wondering why. Why is someone not really talking about this in a way that doesn't blame and shame men, doesn't point fingers at underrepresented populations and say change to be more like what we believe success is, and instead, let's look at the system. Let's understand where those unconscious biases are, why they matter, where they matter, and what we can actually do about them. And that's really the reason for the book, to get away from the blame and shame, to get away from let's bury our heads in the problem and the name calling instead of let's actually figure out what's going on and how we can entrepreneur our way out of this.
That's great. So I really like to focus on the system. It's something we work a lot with as PhDs, right? Protocols, methodologies, et cetera. So I want to talk a little bit about, the individual side that holds people back. But first, I'd like to talk about the system before we drill down to that. So what were the gaps in the system, or where was the system broken?
There are so many, and let's just do the board for fun, right? The board in this. So, and by the way, the glass ceiling is absolutely critical there. We know that. And at the time, I really believed that's where it was the most important. Looking at work by Elizabeth Cranfield, who you're probably familiar with, and her work that she did at, Elizabeth Kellen and her work she did at Cranfield University, was really placed that glass ceiling at that middle manager level, ultimately changed my viewpoint. But in the policy, decision-making, industry-making level, at the board, it's really interesting. When we look at board decisions and when people are earmarked for C-suite and board, we see that it's typically between the ages of 40 and 49. And it makes a lot of sense, right? That's when you've had a lot of experience, a lot of failure, a lot of success. You have grown up with a population of people who are filling out those influencer seats, who are people who will be your next customer, your next board member. So it makes a lot of sense. But here's the problem. That doesn't work for women. It works for men, but it doesn't work for women. If we have children, that tends to be when they need us in an ad hoc basis. It's much easier when your kids are small. If you are part of the sandwich generation like I am at that point, you're also taking care of your parents. You work 3 shifts, you go to work, you come home, you take care of the house. And because women have to constantly prove themselves, which is a system issue thing, we're smart enough, we're tending to spend that 3rd shift in our day educating ourselves. And so our cup essentially runneth over. And in talking with these women, and this was something planted back in my PhD dissertation studies, going, wow, so our system fully believes that it's between the ages of 40 and 49. No one ever stepped back and asked, why? People are living longer. They're working longer than ever. Why not do this? Sure, start at 40, but be okay with women who are 50, 51, 50, men who are 50, 51, 52, right? Because it's not just women. But that's an example where we have this just unconscious bias, the status quo of, well, that's when we look, but it doesn't reflect really the world we live in, how long people are in the workforce, and when we can accommodate something like being on a board or being in a C-suite position.
No, I love that example because it shows that by looking at a system in a different way, you can change it. And it may not make sense, but nobody's ever looked at it. So actually, I wanted to drill into that just a little bit because of our audience. How can you suggest people look at the systems that might be influencing them if they've never looked at them? Like, how did you know to look at that system? So now once you realize it's the system, what kind of questions do you ask yourself? How do you start probing the system and testing it and looking for ways to improve it?
Yeah, and it's such a good question, and it's a hard question because this is a topic that's very passion-based, right? And everybody has a story on this topic, whether they're totally for it like I am. I have my long story that started before my mother was even born, right? The stuff I about my grandmother and being the voice of people who don't necessarily have a platform or voice. For others, they're adamantly against it because so-and-so didn't get a job because they were passed over for whatever affirmative action thing. So everybody has a passion for this. And so that's the first thing. It's very easy. The world we live in right now is a name-calling world, right? We're doing a lot of this regardless of where you are. And I know that we're all facing that, and it's not political, it's how we are. And that's a tipping point challenge. And I think most of us understand that. But when we continue to focus in on this or this, right, then we don't actually focus on the problem. We get caught up in all the rhetoric. So the system, the content is really the safest place. We are all victims of the world that we live in. So how do we question that? One of the easiest things to do is to look at something that's not very passionate. So remember a few years ago, big deal, but not passionate from the same kind of feelings perspective. A few years ago, you might remember in Hawaii, someone in the military pressed the wrong button and sent out this big, right, that big alert saying missiles are coming, right? And anyone who's ever been to Hawaii, who's been to Pearl Harbor, knows how terrifying that is. You are 6,000 miles away from civilization, 6 hours away from any other landform, and you think missiles are coming at you. Well, it turned out it was a mistake. So what did we do? We stepped back, the military stepped back and said, what made that possible, right? And what made it possible was nobody went back in and engineered an off button, right? Or some kind of a QA process. It's the same thing. Look at the world around you. We can go through it all. Let's see. According to McKinsey, if women were paid, just the women in the workforce, were paid equally as men are today, it would add $18 trillion to the global economy. This is an economic imperative. Knowing that women reinvest 90% of the revenue that they make in the world around them, oh my God, it's an economic imperative, right? And we can go through those, all the different demographic stats, whether it's gender or anything else. And then we look and we see who's in charge, who holds power, who has the influence, who has the purse. Women, by the way, control 51% of the wealth in this country. 80 to 90%, like I said, of all consumer buy decisions. We have so much power, we're not in power. It's the same question we asked in Hawaii. What makes this possible? So if I'm going to hire for a role, and I see I'm suffering from what my friend Adam Quinton, who's a VC, calls a meritocracy. That's how he describes the Silicon Valley, right? I hire people who look like me, think like me. And if you see that, if you're going for a hire, if you're going for a job, and you see everyone looks the same, although the company says, I want diversity, which, let's definitely talk about why I had a challenge with that research topic. And yet it's not diverse. You got to ask why. So I hear a lot of the time, well, Patti, I would love to have more women in the top level of my organization, or women in influencer positions, or people of who are not Caucasian or LGBTQ, but I tried, can't find them. What makes that possible? Chances are you're going to the same rooms, talking to the same people about the same things, using the same words and expecting a different outcome. So always ask yourself that question. You want to have a population that you're working with that reflects the population who you want to have buy, read, whatever it is, the stuff that you're doing, and yet the people around you don't look like that. You have to ask yourself why. What am I doing that's different than I did yesterday? Chances are not very much, right? So you have to go out there, and you hear people talk when it comes to diversity and inclusion, you hear them talk about the word intention, and that's critical. You intentionally have to go out and seek members of underrepresented populations, whatever they might be, gender, LGBTQ, differently able, it doesn't matter. You have to go to them, because in their world, their unconscious biases, well, that door's already closed to me because of that meritocracy. They don't see anybody who looks like them, who welcomes them. The words you're using in your job descriptions don't reflect words that they would use for themselves, right? Or words that your search engine would look at. So really stopping and asking yourself, and I'm so happy you asked that question. What we're talking about here is ultimately unconscious bias. There are 150 different unconscious biases that play at our brains at any given time just at work. The only thing research has shown us that combats unconscious bias is decision interruption. I spend a lot of time looking at the use of technology on decision interruption in the workplace, but us forcing ourselves to say, I want a different outcome. I keep getting to the same outcome. What's making this possible?
No, it's fantastic. And I think it really clarifies things from the organizational perspective, from the system perspective. But what about the individual's perspective? So if we flip it to the other side, what kind of personal responsibility does the individual have? An underrepresented individual that's feeling imposter syndrome, for example, to overcome that. Like if there's an opportunity there, if employers come out and look for them, at the end of the day, that person, that PhD has to step up. Like we have a lot of international PhDs.
Yeah.
Sometimes they just feel unconsciously that they can't get a visa, or they don't have the same opportunity, even though they can, and there's companies hiring them, and the data shows in some cases, they still feel that imposter syndrome and they don't try. So what can they do to overcome that? What can they do to seize the opportunities when they present themselves?
Yeah, and it's a really good question and an important one. And going back to what you and Jeanette were talking about before I joined, everybody has imposter syndrome, right? Except for some who don't, and those who don't, you got to question them a little bit. So imposter syndrome is really important. And me, I'm a disruptor. So a disruptor, and that's who I talk to. And scientists tend to be disruptors, right? And disruptors for me, in the way that I would define disruption, is you see a status quo that's no longer working, it's inefficient, it's ineffective, doesn't provide value in a meaningful way, and you have to create a new status quo, right? So you're a disruptor. That's what you do as a disruptor. You assemble people to do that, and that's great. So as a disruptor, taking the job you've never taken before, doing something unprecedented, you can't help but feel imposter syndrome. And guess what? That's a good thing. As a disruptor, you have to, because ultimately what you're thinking is, oh crap, I haven't done this before. Who am I to think that I can do this? They're going to find out. Well, guess what? When someone hires you, they already know what they're getting. And if you are a woman and in that position, you should feel good about yourself, because you're bucking the system. We are conditioned as humans to believe that if a man doesn't know something, he takes a job. If a woman doesn't know something, she takes the class. So and for me, I've always taken the job, like we said in the beginning. So I suffer from imposter syndrome. That's number one. Number two, focus in on competence instead of confidence. So confidence means that I've done this before. You're doing something unprecedented, whether it's for you or someone else. Instead, so you can't have confidence. Instead, think about competence. You are a scientist. Your job is to break stuff down, right? The scientific method. Ask a bunch of questions. And then you ask more questions and more questions and more questions. That's the competence you have. Breaking down something that's extremely complicated, complex, something that you're probably going to bring your unique perspective, build onto the wall of knowledge there. You have what it takes. And I have to tell you, I coach a lot with women who are new CEOs or new board members. They have careers that are 30, 40, years long. They've done incredible things. And yet they suffer from imposter syndrome because they forget that when they were brought onto that board or brought on as CEO, those board members knew what they were getting. They don't feel you need to have the confidence. They just want you to have the competence to figure it out. Everybody needs to understand you have the competence to figure it out. Start from where you are. That will get you to where you need to be. And that's really the topic around equity. Just like you want to, not equality, because equality assumes that if I give you and I the same access, right, the same door, we're going to have the same desired finish line and have the same journey there. It doesn't work that way. That's not how it is. You have things working for and against you. I have things working for and against me. Equity means I'm going to meet you where you are, understand your journey's different, and give you tools in order to overcome whatever unique barriers you have and all that fun stuff. Do that for yourself as well. Start from where you are. Take inventory of what you must know and what other people can help you with, right? Bring in their skills and just go for it. And I know folks like to say, fake it till you make it. In my experience and in my research, that actually feeds more into imposter syndrome, because ultimately what you're doing is you're faking it instead of saying, this is who I am. This is where I'm starting from. Here are the problems that I see, right? The wisdom of not knowing is a good thing, especially as a scientist, right? We're not biased against anything, but trust you have what it takes. You are a scientist. If anybody can figure it out, you can figure it out.
Excellent. And my last question, I want to kind of do a two-part question because I want to tie in that figure you talked about. So we showed this infographic that basically said the more gender equality that you have, the more successful you will be at a company in terms of profits and culture, et cetera. Why is that true or not true in your mind? And then how do we use any kind of knowledge we get about where things are now to help us make decisions in the future and where things are going in the future?
Yeah, and I think, because I'm a scientist and a word person, right, and you are as well, right, we both talk for a living, we know the importance of words. Just like there's a distinction between equity and equality. I can't stand the word empower. That's not my job, is to empower you, right? It's about enablement. It's the same thing with diversity. Diversity does not equate to better returns, better innovation. All diversity is bean counting. I have this many who look like this many who look like that, this many who look like that. Inclusion is about culture. It's about having those practices that those middle managers, the people responsible for deciding who comes into your organization, how people get developed, who gets promoted up to the next level, right? That's where your drop-off rate is typically in an organization, and therefore they're responsible for the culture. For them to be able to be so inclusive that we get to the next thing, which is belonging. 72% of the world reports is unhappy. 89% of the workforce around the globe reports is disengaged and has for the last 10 years. Why? We live in a one-size-fits-all world that fits one very, very, very small population of people. Going back to all that system stuff we talked about, right, and what we learn when we study business at the scholarly level. And so instead of thinking about diversity, because quite frankly, it is a reality, it's not an option, right? You don't have a choice. Let's instead look at the culture and go from I am able to not only provide the programs and education, but those reinforcement mechanisms, the new tools for the people who are responsible for hiring, managing, to be able to manage and lead differently, to a point where I look in the mirror and I say, I belong here. That is what the difference is between financial outcomes and innovation outcomes. Because what happens when I feel like I belong? I'm going to do my best work. I'm going to bring my whole self to work. That has nothing to do with diversity. You're going to have diversity, but it doesn't mean people are at the right layers. It doesn't mean they're going to stay, and it certainly doesn't mean they're going to be engaged and give you the best of what they have. It's a nuanced question.
I see. So so what's bringing that profitability or the success of the company is tapping into every different type of individual's identity, essentially, so they feel like they belong to something greater.
That's right. And it's a challenge, right? So I tend to work with, absolutely, I work with startups, but the majority of my career has been with the Fortune 1000, really big companies. Lots of them are really old companies. And even the newer ones like Google, right, Amazon, they have a lot of challenges, real bro culture. It is very hard to shift culture. We all know what Drucker may or may not have said about, culture eating strategy for breakfast, but it's ultimately true. And so it's really, really hard to change those cultural constructs, to go from exclusive to inclusive, to go from inclusive to you belong, to go from you belong to I belong. But it can be done. And it goes back to, I saw someone in the feed going, I like entrepreneur as a verb, but that's exactly what it is. And that's what's important, by the way, on this topic. The folks who are on the other side, right? So you're a white man, right? You fit this kind of profile of what we believe success in a CEO looks like. And there are lots of men who fit that profile who then feel quite victimized, quite frankly. And I understand that. I understand that psyche. It's been pretty difficult, right, for certain folks to feel like the finger isn't being pointed at them. And that's not what we want, right? That's not what we want at all. And so to be able to have it where everybody is able to make these decisions, to be included, to feel like they belong is important. And we have to be able to entrepreneur and understand that what's a problem over in this part of the organization is not going to be a problem somewhere else. And for people like you, for me, anyone in the workforce, to not see that my leaders have done it perfectly, but they are trying. They are looking at the data. They're exposing the data. They're giving transparency. They're seeing that this might work here, but not over there. That's okay. We're not going to figure this out for a long time. Our systems are very, very old, but we have to start somewhere. And it's really exciting stuff.
Thank you so much, Dr. Patti. Please do me a favor and thank Dr. Patti in the chat box. So I showed your website and your book. Is there anywhere specifically you think this audience should go to connect with you?
Definitely check me out on Twitter. Yep, Patti Fletcher. I'm really active on social. Go to my Facebook page, Dr. Patti Fletcher, and on Instagram, Dr. Patti Fletcher. I respond, so check me out, ask me any questions, and also, of course, check out my entrepreneur articles. I'm always looking for new topics. I like to bring forth women who are disrupting the world, and our male allies who are doing the same.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Patti. This is Dr. Patti's Twitter page, so you can connect with her there, on LinkedIn as well. We really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.